Cersei Lannister's prophecy from Maggy the Frog predicts everything that happens to her in Game of Thrones, and this makes it one of the most interesting elements of the HBO series and the books it's based on. Cersei's prophecy is pulled from George R. R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire series, though the adaptation changes her conversation with Maggy slightly. The circumstances that lead to her meeting with Maggy are the same. However, a young Cersei visits the witch with a friend, hoping to learn more about their futures. While tracking down Maggy originally seems like fun for the girls, their visit with the witch turns out to be darker than they expected. When Cersei recalls their meeting in a feast for crows, it's revealed that her friend drowned not long after Maggy told her worms will have your maidenhead. Your death is here tonight, little one. Although Cersei's life isn't cut short after her time with Maggy, the witch delivers worrisome predictions for her as well. It's no surprise that Cersei remembers Maggy's words with fear, as they actually inform what happens in the books and show. Maggy the Frog predicts that Cersei will be queen, and knows how it will happen. She tells Cersei that she won't become queen by marrying Rhaegar. Cersei Lannister and Robert Baratheon sitting next to one another with Tommen at their side in Game of Thrones. Cersei asks Maggy the Frog 3 questions when she meets her, and the first is whether she'll wed the prince. It's clear Cersei is interested in the Iron Throne even at a young age, but the prince she's referring to is Rhaegar Targaryen. Cersei wants to marry Rhaegar as a girl, and her father suggests that the two of them be wed. King Aerys II Targaryen turns down this offer, but Cersei is hopeful about becoming Rhaegar's betrothed when she meets with Maggy. Maggy the Frog knows it won't happen, and that Cersei will marry someone else to become queen. Maggy the Frog answers her question about whether she'll wed the prince by saying, "Never. You will wed the king." She's, of course, referring to Robert Baratheon, though Cersei doesn't know it at the time. Robert becomes the king after Robert's rebellion, and Tywin Lannister convinces him to marry Cersei in order to obtain influence and power. Cersei's relationship with Robert isn't what her younger self envisioned for her future, even if it secures her a position of power. This is probably the most uplifting part of Maggy's prophecy, and it still has a bleak outcome for Cersei. The prophecy states a younger, more beautiful queen will take Cersei's throne. Maggy the Frog could be referring to Daenerys Targaryen or Margaery Tyrell. After Maggy the Frog confirms that Cersei will marry the king, Cersei clarifies, "I will be queen, though." The witch reaffirms this before delivering bad news for Cersei's reign, that it's destined to end when another queen rises to power. This is a detail that sticks with Cersei well into A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. Maggy's warning about the queen that takes Cersei's place informs many of her interactions with other women. It reads as follows: it's not entirely clear who Maggy is referring to in Martin's books, as Cersei's story isn't complete. Cersei does become queen when she marries Robert, and Margaery Tyrell takes that title when Joffrey and then Tommen are crowned, both of whom she marries, though neither marriage is consummated. In the show, Margaery also becomes queen in place of Cersei, but Cersei reclaims the throne once her children, and Margaery, are dead. Daenerys Targaryen casts her down in Game of Thrones Season 8, so the prophecy could also refer to her regardless of who the younger queen is. Cersei seems to be on edge around every woman who poses a threat to her position. Maggy the Frog's words make sense of the way she treats Sansa Stark and Margaery, as she believes either of them could be the woman she was warned about. Cersei does everything in her power to ensure they don't have an advantage over her, but she might be looking for threats in the wrong places. Maggy knows how many children Cersei will have and what happens to them. Her perplexing sentiment makes sense knowing how things turn out. The final question that Cersei asks Maggy is, will the king and I have children? And although her cryptic answer is puzzling to Cersei as a child, it makes a lot of sense knowing how things turned out for Cersei and Robert. Maggy states, 6 and 10 for him, and 3 for you. She differentiates between the two of them because Robert and Cersei never actually have children together. Robert fathers 16 bastards, something that comes up throughout Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. Meanwhile, all 3 of Cersei's children are actually Jaime's. Maggy knows this, too, since she tells Cersei, "Gold shall be their crowns, and gold their shrouds." The crowns part has a double meaning, as 2 of Cersei's children wear golden crowns during their time as king. However, given Maggy's distinction between Cersei's children and Robert's, it's more likely she's referring to their golden Lannister hair. She knows that Cersei's children will be fathered by Jaime, and their golden crowns highlight that. After all, this is how Ned Stark comes to the realization that none of Cersei's children are Baratheons. The shrouds part is more intriguing and concerning for Cersei, as Maggy the Frog is seemingly referring to funeral shrouds. The prophecy indicates that Cersei's children will all die prematurely, and judging by Game of Thrones, this prediction will also come true. As of this writing, only Joffrey is dead in both the books and the show. However, Myrcella is traveling home on a ship from Dorne at the end of A Dance with Dragons, and that's precisely where she dies in Game of Thrones. The Winds of Winter could give her a similar fate. It's also likely that Tommen will perish at some point during the next 2 Song of Ice and Fire books, even though he's currently still alive. He dies by jumping from a window of the Red Keep in Game of Thrones, and Maggy's predictions indicate he'll meet a tragic end in Martin's novels as well. It's hard to see how Tommen could survive, especially with so many more mature and ruthless enemies vying for his throne. Maggy the Frog predicted Cersei's death in the books. Cersei Lannister sat on the Iron Throne in Game of Thrones Season 8. Although this part of Cersei's prophecy is cut from Game of Thrones, Maggy the Frog predicts Cersei's death in Martin's books. After the line about Cersei's children and their golden shrouds, she reveals that Cersei will meet a seemingly violent end. Maggy claims it will happen after she's lost everything, stating this prediction is especially interesting because Valonqa means younger brother in High Valyrian. Cersei is the eldest of the 3 Lannister siblings, so Maggy could be referring to either Tyrion or Jaime. Cersei clearly believes Tyrion will be the one to kill her, and that's why she treats him so dreadfully in the books and the show. While she doesn't think Jaime would ever hurt her, she's convinced Tyrion is hateful enough to do so. She could be right, as Tyrion's book arc is leading him to Daenerys, which will pit him against Cersei in the end. However, there are also theories that Jaime could be the brother Maggy is referring to. This would put an interesting spin on Cersei's prophecy, upending her expectations and those of the readers. Jaime has no reason to choke the life from Cersei currently, but that could change in the Winds of Winter or A Dream of